Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Weiner, Program Manager of Education and Practice at the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. Thank you for joining us for today's ASPPH Presents Student Services Spotlight webinar, Post Like a Pro, Extend Your Reach and Increase Engagement. Today's webinar will be 1 hour in length. We will begin with a short introduction of our presenter, followed by the presentation, and we'll leave time at the end for questions. This webinar is part of the 2017 ASPPH Presents monthly series. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the ASPPH website in the archived webinar section soon. Additionally, this webinar has been approved for 1 hour of CPH continuing education credit. A few housekeeping items of note: while you are in listen-only mode and your lines have been muted, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation by using the question box. We will address your questions at the end of the presentation. We are pleased to have with us today our speaker, Lorian Green, who has been managing social media professionally since 2010 and has experience with both B2B and B2C audiences. Thank you for being here today, Lorian. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. Okay, well, first of all, hi everyone and welcome. Thank you for coming. Today we're going to talk about social media and how you can use it for business marketing. But first, I have a small confession to make. I am not a social media guru or even an expert. I know it's awful. I have lived and breathed social on both a personal and professional level for the last 10 years or so. But I really do believe the reason that I'm saying this is that I don't think anyone's an expert at social media, and there are a couple reasons for that. First, the landscape just changes and evolves way too fast. Just when I think I've mastered Facebook, they introduce live streaming. Just when I think I'm, up to speed and completely got it on LinkedIn, they enable hashtags like Twitter has. So the learning curve is never over with social media, and that's actually why I really love it and why I'm here today to talk to you about it. Secondly, even if I admitted to being an expert at my corner of social media, every audience is different. So when people go around saying they're gurus and making decrees about the best time to post on social media and things like that, always keep in mind that nobody knows your social audience better than you do. You guys are the ones who are going to come closest to being experts at your social media. So that said, I do have a lot of best practices and helpful tips that I've learned along the way, and I'm here to share with you today. So let's do this. As was said, post questions in the chat as they come up, and I'll address them at the end of the webinar. So while I could literally talk all day about social media, here are the high points we're going to cover in today's webinar. We will start with the basics, which are helpful even if you've already got your social media up and running, by the way. These are good exercises to go through, so that'll be a good part. Next, we'll talk about social media's BFF, content marketing. It's like the peanut butter to social media's chocolate. And it has the added benefit of giving you some sweet search engine optimization. So these two things work very well together, and I'm going to talk a bit about that synergy. And then from there, we're going to talk about what it looks like when all these best practices and recommendations are implemented and you're in the weeds actually doing social media on a day-to-day basis. We'll go from the theoretical to the actual, as it were. We'll talk about how your strategy might vary depending on the size of your social media team, and there are differences, obviously. And lastly, I'll cover all my trade secrets, as long as you promise not to tell my boss or any of, those millennials out there preparing to take my job. I'm sure it'll be fine. Okay. So getting started with social. The first question you might ask yourself is kind of an existential one. Why are we here? Why invest in social media? Yeah, I mean, everybody's doing social media, and you get the feeling it's not an optional part of online marketing, and it isn't, by the way. But what's the goal? What are we looking to gain? What should your expectations be? There are many reasons to be on social media, but these are some of the main ones. First off, to create awareness. Your print marketing and banner ads and websites and all that stuff are important, of course. But social media gives you a chance to show the world who you are. Your institution can actually have a personality on social media. And showing the world who you are is really important for recruiting the right students. It's giving them a taste of what they can expect if they choose you for the big chunk of their lives. Next, to engage and inspire loyalty. People want to be able to feel connected to the places they do business with and the brands they buy in today's world. And that's especially true of their alma maters. It always has been. But when your students follow you on social media, it's not an association that ends in 4 years or however long they're with you. You have an open communication channel that will last much longer and really feel more like a relationship if you play your cards right. Social media helps you create a level of loyalty and engagement that will only increase over time. Because typically, especially with something like a school relationship, your followers are not going to unfollow you. So you're really just going to grow over time. And a new prospective student that comes to your Facebook page and sees engagement between you and existing and past students, they see a long-term relationship, and that's an attractive thing to be a part of. Another element of this is that it has been shown that social media ties can help you down the road with alumni fundraising efforts. So it all contributes to a lasting sense of belonging, and that's what you're looking for. And then lastly, it's where your audience lives. We all know that social media is part of teenage life now. In fact, nearly 80% of teens are on Snapchat, followed closely by Facebook and Instagram. And truly, this is where your prospective students live. Research shows that they spend around 3 hours a day on social platforms, if you can imagine that, on average. Not only are they there, so they're there for a significant chunk of time. So you got to be there too. So how do we conquer this brave new world of social media? As with any marketing efforts, you need a game plan. Just being on social isn't enough, and you need to have set your goals and know what to expect. So let's talk about the first things you should do when you sit down to create a social media program. Keep in mind, like I said, if you already have social up and running, you should still go through all these steps. And you should conduct periodic audits of your social efforts as well to ensure that they're working for you. So first step, and this is a good first step, by the way, for personal social accounts like Twitter as well, and this whole idea of personal brand, this kind of a roadmap helps with that too. So the first step is to determine your voice and main themes. Are you a casual place or are you formal? Are you going to be posting, animated GIFs like the cool kids do, using lots of emojis pasted in there? Or are you going to be presenting a more formal, sort of all business persona? Obviously, this has to match with the mission of your institution and the way that you present yourself in other forms of marketing. But you really do need to sit down and figure this out. So, what are the core topics you're going to focus on when it comes to sharing news? Figuring that out in advance reduces ambiguity later on, and people know what to post about. And your audience knows what to expect as well. Second, document who has access to every account. And this is so important. And it's so easy to kind of blow this part off and be like, on the fly in the weeds and ignore it. But you really need to create a document of everyone who has access to every account, and you need to maintain it religiously. Also, you need to document the passwords for each account, and don't use the same password across every social account. And I know it's a hassle, and I know that's a pain in the butt, but it's so important. Because if someone winds up getting access to one social account, you definitely don't want them to have the keys to the kingdom. Also, don't store all your passwords in an electronic file with passwords in the title. The safest, surprisingly, and actually this is something that I had a discussion with Sophos on their Facebook page about, but the safest format for passwords is a written document stored on site, because somebody breaking into your network does not have access to that. So also updating passwords for your social accounts, again, a hassle, but you really should do it periodically, especially if a member of your team leaves. Just better safe than sorry, Social is very public. And then, lastly, create a crisis management plan in case of emergencies. The time to figure out how you'll handle a crisis is not during the crisis. Maybe you'll never need this, but if you do, you're going to be really glad that you did it. You want to include information about the escalation protocol. And again, not just for emergencies. If somebody has a customer service inquiry, you want to know who to send that to, who to inform, who responds. You want to know what the initial responses should be too. You know, if somebody goes on your Twitter at 2 a.m., requesting something, you do want to respond as quickly as possible, even if it's just sort of a holdover, like, hey, we'll look into that for you. Thanks for your question. And make sure everyone who has access to your social media knows the plan, because otherwise, you may as well not have a plan. So if you get this part of your house in order, the rest of it's going to run a lot smoother. Next, choose your platforms wisely. Don't just assume Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, because those are the ones you always hear about. And I like having this bird because to me, I always like to think of it as more mouths to feed, because as a social media manager implementing this stuff daily, every time someone comes and says, oh, we should be on Pinterest, we should be on Snapchat, it does feel like here comes another mouth to feed, and social requires upkeep. So each one of these things magnifies the amount of time you're going to put in there. So that's why I say choose your platforms wisely and carefully. Go where your audience is most likely to be. A wedding planner would be crazy not to go on Pinterest, for example. A lot of this is demographic controlled, but I typically see Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram in play for higher education. But given the demographic stats that we discussed earlier, Snapchat is kind of a shoo-in for your target demographic. And I think the main thing holding a lot of marketers back from that platform is just not understanding how to market on it. But when 79% of your target market is there, it's probably worth your time to figure that out. You want to go where your goals are most easily accomplished. Target demographic isn't the only consideration. If you're running social media with limited resources, some social platforms can be bigger resource hogs than others. For example, Instagram is definitely where your demographic lives, but it's a highly visual platform. So you're going to need graphic design resources. Not only that, the optimal image dimensions on Instagram are completely different from most other social platforms. So you can get away with using the same kind of rectangular shaped image on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, but you need to create a second square format image optimized for Instagram if you're on there, because Instagram, as you know, is the squared off image. And it will clip your stuff if you don't do that. It's just something to consider, when you're looking at your available resources. Another example would be Twitter, because while best practices recommend 2 to 4 posts a day on most other platforms, Twitter posts are measured in a lifespan of like minutes. And the recommended minimum is 10 posts a day. Now, I don't typically hit that, but that's just, something to keep in mind. The volume is just higher on Twitter. So you really have to look at the resources you have and figure out how you can most easily accomplish your goals with those resources. Like I said, all this folds into the consideration of available resources. There are so many social platforms you could be on, but it would take an army to cover them all, and there's really no real benefit to doing that. So don't try to be everywhere. Just choose carefully where you'll be most effective and focus on making those platforms the best representation of your institution that you can. And keep in mind, as times change and social platforms come and go, don't be afraid to axe something that's not working anymore. Google Plus, for example, for the most part, it's one of those things that didn't work out for most people. But if you created a profile there, don't just abandon it, because nothing looks worse on a social media account than no activity. Because if people come to that account and see nothing, then it's not a good look. So if it's not working, delete it. It's the humane thing to do. So, once you've decided where your social presence is going to be and created the profiles, you know, with the perfectly optimized descriptions and pictures and header images and all that, you want to tell the world, this isn't a field of dreams, you know, just building it won't make them come. It's time for some marketing. Also known as shameless self-promotion. So the first place to start is with links to your social profiles on your own website. Use the standard social icons because everybody knows what those mean. And the best place to put them is in the header or the footer of your site, because that's where people are going to look for them. That's the expectation. Another option is under Contact Us or About Us, but I strongly recommend the header or the footer. It's just easier, and then it carries through to every single page. Add share buttons on all your site content because you want to encourage people to share it. Your blog, of course, but other parts of your site as well. These are different, by the way, from the social buttons we just talked about that link to your own social accounts. And that can be confusing for some people, but these are for people to click and share your website content to their social accounts. And on a content marketing note, try to make sure every page and every blog article you expect people might share has a nice image on the page for social media to pull. Ideally 800 pixels wide at least, and you know, rectangular is the typical format that I go with. I typically go with 800 by 418 is the least frequently clipped image size. So again, 800 by 418 pixels, and that'll make people's social shares of your content look nice. Don't forget to add links to your social profiles in other places like newsletter footers and company email signatures. The important thing is to get the word out. So try to think of every way that you touch people and your audience, and try to see if social makes sense to go there. If you've got a Facebook account, like with a decent Facebook following, and you decide to open a new Twitter account, one of the first things you should do is tell your Facebook followers about your new Twitter account and invite them to follow you there. Because getting the initial critical mass of followers is often a challenge. It can be really hard, especially if you're doing it organically without paying for it. And cross-pollination on social is one of the best ways to help you do that. So make sure you do that. And also having one follower connected with you on multiple accounts is not a bad thing. It only serves to increase the odds that they're seeing your content. So that duplication is not bad. Now it's time to talk about marketing automation. Now this isn't about, you know, chatbots running your social media or robots taking over the world, or, you know, putting your social media on autopilot and never looking at it again. It's more about making the repetitive tasks that can be automated happen more easily. And that gives you more time to do the engagement pieces that really require that individualized human attention. Now, some common social media automation tools you've probably heard of include Hootsuite, Buffer, IFTTT, and TweetDeck. The main function of these services is to make it easier for scheduling and sometimes monitoring scheduling of posts. Now, I'm going to focus on Hootsuite for the most part because it happens to be my favorite, and because it comes in a range of options from free to enterprise. Hootsuite allows you to sit down like on a Monday morning when you come into the office and schedule out, you know, a base level of posts for the week for social. And then you can check to see if anyone's mentioned you right within the Hootsuite tool. You can respond or like posts as necessary. You can check the latest news on specific keyword search terms you're following, and you can even spy on the competition. I highly recommend you go sign up for a personal Hootsuite account right now if you don't use it already. The basic account is free, and it lets you do like 3 social profiles, which is plenty to get started with. I use it for my personal social media too. So I don't want to turn this webinar into a Hootsuite demo, obviously. So for now, I'm just going to show you a snapshot from Liaison's Hootsuite instance so you can kind of see what this looks like. So this is just a quick screen capture of the scheduling functionality. So from here, I could choose any one of those different social accounts that you see on the left, write a post. I could even choose multiple accounts if I wanted to, and then I can schedule it for today or for a future date. I can use the auto schedule feature if I want and just let Hootsuite decide what it thinks is the best time to send this message based on, you know, prior traffic and so forth. Again, of my own account, so that's a good thing. I can attach an image. I could use the link shortener, which is always nice. It makes it look pretty. And it also allows you to track performance and clicks and so forth. And then I could go back later in Hootsuite's analytics section and see how the post did as far as shares and likes and click-throughs very easily. I can do all this from the computer or from the Hootsuite app on my phone. So also 2 of my colleagues have access to our Hootsuite instance, so we can collaborate as a team. They can add posts through Hootsuite and I can view them and edit them and reschedule them if I need to. So it really just makes social media marketing so much easier. And I can't say enough good about it. They also have really good free social media education with their Hootsuite Academy thing. So that's worth looking into as well if you'd like to dive deeper. Now it's time to talk about peanut butter and chocolate. Content marketing and social media. So content marketing gives social media something to post about, obviously, and social media drives visitors to the content pieces. And additional traffic to your content pieces gives them credibility in the eyes of Google, and it helps the pages and actually your entire website rank higher. So that's the way these 2 things work together. And obviously they can function, you know, apart, but it's one of those things where they really are a marketing power couple when you do them together if you do them well. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now, creating your own content. Creating your own content is work. It's a lot of work, especially good content, valuable content that people will like enough to want to share, most important of all. But there's no point in creating content unless it fits that bill. The good news is there are a whole lot of different kinds of content you can create. We're going to talk about those. Here are just some of your options. Blogs, obviously, which we discussed. Podcasts, and that's something where you may be able to tap your students to help with. Research reports are really, really core to content creation. And if you have those, you know, in your toolbox, then you can do an awful lot with them, and I'll show you that in a minute here. Images, you can create images, and the images can be standalone posts, you know, especially kind of fun, playful images like memes and so forth. And it's something you can very easily and quickly create. Event coverage, you can live stream events, you can do, you know, Instagram stories about events that you're holding on campus. All that kind of stuff is really, really powerful and really easy to do, actually. Webinars, like the one we're on right now, is great content and helps you gather leads. And webinars are very popular in the United States. Interestingly, not so popular in Germany. I've heard people don't like them, but here in the US, they're very popular, so take advantage. Infographics, which are a little bit more involved to create than images, but they were extremely popular a few years back. They had kind of a dip, but they're coming back right now. So for whatever reason, infographics are super popular right now. And then there's SlideShares, which is basically slideshare.net. It's owned by LinkedIn, and essentially it is YouTube for PowerPoint. And you don't want to necessarily take a PowerPoint and paste it right up onto SlideShare, but it's another really effective way to share content, especially more information-rich content like we are likely to have here. You've also got videos, obviously. One of the most intense types of content as far as labor goes, but really does give you some bang for the buck. It's worth it. Quizzes, questions, and polls, which you can do, you know, on Facebook. They have, and Twitter. There's a lot of functionality for that kind of thing, and those do a great job of driving engagement. And the algorithms on social media look for engagement, especially Facebook, for example. If you are getting a lot of engagement, likes, comments on your posts, then Facebook's going to take that as a reason to show your content more frequently. So mixing in a good selection of this stuff where you can is really, really smart. And then there's live streaming, which is huge right now. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it could really be a webinar of its own. But, you know, Facebook reported that people comment more than 10 times more on live videos than regular videos. And that's saying something because on regular videos, the engagement's quite high to begin with. So live streaming, definitely worth your time. You definitely have an industry where you have the opportunity to do it, many opportunities. And I highly recommend you play with that. It doesn't have to be formal. It's not expected that it's going to be formal and polished like some of your video content. So it's a great thing. It's a great tool to experiment with, and you should. Live streaming as a page on Facebook is a little different than live streaming as a person. There's a specific app. Facebook has a Pages app that's relatively new, and that's the way you live stream. But, you know, if you Google it, you can figure out, you know, it's not complicated, but you do need to use the Pages app for live streaming Facebook. Now, lists, the internet loves lists. You can do that as a blog. You can do it as, you know, various pieces of broken up content. There's a lot you can do with lists, and it's human nature. We love them. So if you have opportunities to use lists in your content, that's great content to create. Contests, that's also very popular on social. It can drive increases in followers. It can get you good engagement. You know, just be judicious with how you do it and make sure that you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, because there are certain legal restrictions to contests, and you need to be mindful of that. And then lastly, curated information. That's a really good one to go for, because you're providing, it's not necessarily your own stuff, but you're collecting information from sources that people can assume are reputable coming from you. And you're saving them the time of having to go and dig around in your space of expertise. And that's the kind of thing that is providing value to an audience. So while it may not be directly benefiting you, it does directly benefit you. It's just not necessarily your content, but it's very easy to create. You know, like we do on the Liaison side, Friday 4 at 4, where we take 4 things that happen in the industry and make a blog post out of it and summarize them. And that's basically free content. So, you know, take advantage of that too. But this is like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much you can do. And the other great thing is repurposing the content that you create. Because obviously you don't want to spend the effort of making a blog post and have it just be that one piece of content if you can, you know, spin that off into other forms of content. So this is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm going to walk you through that. So content can be recreated in multiple different formats and variants, and you can get a lot of mileage from just one piece by doing this. I'm going to share a recent example of something we actually did, but I've done this many times throughout my social career, and the results are always really satisfying. So in this case, we were working on a social media, on the social media for explorehealthcareers.org, and our content manager found a report on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. And among other things, this report laid out the expected job outlook for a large number of occupations within the healthcare industry. And that's our jam. So our content leveraging wheels started turning. So the first thing we did was create a collection of career spotlight blog articles about careers mentioned in the report that were also featured on our website. We had our designer create stat graphics for each one of these, and that's one of them right there, and here's a few more. These were embedded in each of the individual blog articles, and stat graphics like this are a really great way to increase a visitor's time on your article page, as they will spend more time looking at the image than they would just reading the statistic. I mean, we're all visual creatures, that's probably no surprise, but Google keeps track of time on page. So if people are spending more time on your pages, then you're going to rank better. So that's just a little trick we recently employed, and it's working very well for us. Now, next, we wrote a longer, more in-depth article that highlighted the top careers mentioned in the report. And for that article, we didn't take the individual stat graphics. We included an infographic that presented pretty much the same things as the stat graphics, but as a collection and with kind of a different stylized presentation. You know the way infographics are, they kind of have an art to them. So we did that. And in addition to, let's see if I have so this was the infographic that we created, which you can see it has a lot of the same data, but it's just kind of a different packaging. So in addition to embedding that on our long form article, and again, Google loves long form articles. So for content marketing, this stuff is all coming together. We also put this infographic up on SlideShare, because SlideShare, like I said, it's for PowerPoint, but it's also a big source for infographics. And it's just a way to make people very easily able to share that content. So we hosted it on SlideShare as its own piece. And in the story, from the data presented in that single report, we were able to create over a dozen different pieces of content. And we just had, social posts for days out of that. And we stopped there. We didn't have to. We might go back to it, like we could make a PowerPoint deck out of this very easily and put another SlideShare piece together. There's a lot we could do with it, but this is just an example to illustrate, what you can do with this content repurposing idea. And while this example started with the seed of a report from another source that we didn't create, it's even more powerful to apply this approach to mining your own data and coming up with an interesting report and, turning it into not only a bunch of different content variants, but the thought leadership that you get from having an original research piece. So that's a quick snapshot on the ways that content marketing can take social media to the next level. Really, they're like my kids, I love them both the same, content marketing and social. They're awesome. So next, we're going to talk about what a day in the life looks like for social media marketers. It's more exciting than it sounds. And how we put best practices into action on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about the essential components of running social media. You keep these things in the back of your head day to day with what you're doing. It's like your basic, your daily affirmations for social. First off, regularity. It's important to post regularly on social media, obviously. That's one reason that automation tools like Hootsuite are so valuable. It's also important to create and stick to a regular content schedule, especially for blogs and podcasts. Because if your audience knows you post every Tuesday, then even if they miss that notification on social about a new blog post, they'll still remember to go to your blog for an article because it's Tuesday. If you start missing Tuesdays with your post schedule, then you just derail all that behavioral conditioning. So it's really important to keep a regular schedule. And then engagement. Like I said before, the human touch. One of the first things you should look for every day is any mentions or messages directed at your social profiles. According to a survey by Spider Marketing last year, 84% of consumers expect companies to respond on social media within 24 hours of being contacted, like within 24 hours of their tweeting at you or posting on your Facebook. So it's really wise to check a few times a day if you can. Those sorts of metrics typically apply to customer service issues, but even if a comment's good, you do want to respond promptly. So that's one of the first things you should do when you get up in the morning on social. Next, transparency. So speaking of those customer service issues, don't be afraid of negative comments on social. And unless they're really offensive or in bad taste, don't delete them because people see that. They represent an opportunity to show not only the original poster, but your audience that you're listening and that you care. If it's a sensitive topic of complaint, like request their contact info and work towards taking the conversation offline quickly, but let people see that you answered. Deleting a complaint does not make the complaint go away. It should be a last resort, like I said, if it's hate speech or something of that nature. Some of the most negative customers I've dealt with on social media turned into some of our strongest advocates when we handled the issue professionally and with empathy. Empathy is so important on social. It's really all about that. So don't miss that opportunity. And then metrics. What's working? You know, all the social platforms come with pretty robust tracking analytics to show you at a glance what were the most popular posts any given month, you know, how many followers you gained each day, and many other useful things, but they're only useful if you're looking at them and drawing conclusions from them. So look at them. On the website side, Google Analytics can tell you what new content's getting the most traffic. And I've used that in the past as an indicator of what new content to create. Even something as simple as looking at the most visited blog posts from the past year and creating like a year-end roundup of the top 10 blog posts, that's content curation of your own content. But it's very effective. And bottom line, if you're not measuring your efforts, how do you know what's working and what's not working? And we all have finite amounts of time, so we've got to use it efficiently. You want a successful program, so the analytics are there. You just have to look. Now we're going to talk about how social media management works depending on the size of the team that's doing it. These days, social teams come in all shapes and sizes, and it's possible to do good social at whatever scale you've been dealt. It just looks a little different. So first, the army of one. And this is actually quite common. It's the scenario of a single social media manager in charge of everything. If you only have one person, or maybe one person with other duties to worry about in addition to social media, so even less than one person, how does that one person most efficiently manage your social media? First, obvious thing is to, again, be careful about how many social media platforms you operate on in this scenario. But beyond that, you want to maximize the use of your automation tools. Honestly, I don't know how you could really do it effectively without the help of automation if you've only got the one person. But that's important, you know, take advantage of that. And above all, social media is an engagement channel, like I said. So engagement should come first. And if that means posting once a day instead of twice, then so be it. You know, the need for this definitely depends on the size and engagement levels of your specific audience. But if you do reduce post frequency in favor of engagement, make sure you don't wind up only posting about yourself, you know, your own blog articles and so forth. Social is not a marketing megaphone, and that is one of the pitfalls where people frequently fall in, as they treat it as such. But you want to be sharing useful information for your audience, and it's not always going to be about you. A good rule of thumb is to aim for no more than half of your posts to be about you. The rest should be valuable content. And sometimes your content, but, you know, be careful about that. Create a collection of backup posts you can schedule in anytime existing content spin. Now, these will be your content. They can be things like research reports and white papers or other content that, you know, is basically timeless, doesn't expire, like top 10 ways to budget for college, for example, would be one thing. And obviously you don't want to, you know, be using that one over and over every week. So I like to keep track. I have a column in the Evergreen content repository that I have here where I note when I've used a specific one, so we don't, you know, pile on. And eventually, like, I knock them out once we've, you know, kind of covered that one enough. But this, I have to tell you, is a lifesaver. If, you know, you come in on a Monday and there's just like a very thin amount of posts scheduled and you really need something, or, you know, I've been sharing a whole lot about other that other stuff I've been telling you about, you know, content not by you, and it's like, oh, you know, it's time to actually share some stuff about us again. That's a good place to go to kind of refresh yourself on some of the stuff you can easily share. Lastly, when you write a post or, you know, a piece of content, then write several variants of the social media post and schedule them all in, say, you know, 1 week, the next week, and then 3 weeks from now. because it's all right to repost content. And even posting the same piece of content twice in one day on Twitter carries a very low risk of any one person seeing both posts. Now, I'm not advocating that you post the same thing twice in one day on Twitter. The point is that you could, and you're not spamming people if you sprinkle in a few versions of a post that goes to the same thing. In fact, it's good because you want people who didn't get a chance, maybe missed that first post, to have a chance to see your content. So that's my advice for the army of one, which I'm very familiar with being. Next, tag team. What about if you've got a team, a couple of people or more? Probably it's not their sole focus, but if they have like a few hours a week each to support your social media, what's that look like? Well, first off, communication and delineation of duties is increasingly important as soon as more than one person has access to your social media account. You need to delineate who's responsible for what. And again, this is one of those things, you do it from the beginning and you'll save yourself a lot of headaches. Second, you don't want to wind up in a situation where two people are simultaneously responding to a message on social media. So make sure it's clear who's in charge of what. And then beyond that, a lot of the same principles apply to that. All team members can contribute to the Evergreen Post Repository, and it's easier to manage things like vacations when you don't have the army of one, because someone can always be there to monitor engagement and mentions. So then there's duties across a group, the embarrassment of riches, multiple contributors across multiple departments. And while it may sound fantastic to have that many resources dedicated to social, and believe me, it is fantastic, bigger teams do come with new sets of considerations. So this is how you delegate and manage for multiple participants across multiple departments. First off, again, a centralized communication structure, super important. Regular team meetings are important because more cooks in the kitchen mean more opinions, and people need the opportunity to share their ideas and observations with the team. And obviously, delineation of duties is important, but you also need people to be able to clearly discern what department a given customer inquiry should be handled by, or have a designated social media lead to make that determination. Basically, with a larger team, you do kind of want to have certain people taking the lead. Again, communication goes without saying in this scenario, but it's not just day-to-day communication that's important. It's really important to have gone through the initial first steps that I mentioned of the social media program creation and identified what the main focus and themes of the social account should be. And it's possible that some departments, like your institution's sport team, may need their own social media account. Splitting efforts has its pros and cons, so make sure this is warranted when you do it, but sometimes it is the logical choice. Okay, we've reached the home stretch of the presentation, and it's my favorite section, of course. This is the part where I tell you the things I've found over the years that have helped me efficiently manage social media. These are the parts of the job that are fun. First off, number one tip, be visual. We've all been told that a picture's worth 1,000 words, as long as we can remember, and social media is no exception. Never has been, but now it's even more important. Facebook posts with images get 2.3 times more engagement than those without images. And partly this is just because it's taking up more space on the feed. You get more real estate when you add an image. Tweets with images get 150% more retweets than tweets without images. The images above, I created them very quickly in a free tool called Canva. There are countless free tools online that you can use for this stuff, and let's talk about those a little bit. I like to call them power tools. So I use most of these tools that I'm about to go over every week, if not every day. Hootsuite, yeah, you probably heard that one before from me. It's just that I don't know what my social media world would look like without it. It's just so great. But it depends. You can use other things, and certainly there are other paid services like Sprout Social and that you can use in addition to Hootsuite. But partly because I'm biased because I use it on my personal account, I'm just extremely well versed in it, and it's my favorite. Hashtagify.me, if you haven't seen this, is for hashtag discovery. And as I mentioned, LinkedIn is starting to dabble in hashtags too, so it's pretty much cross-platform at this point. Although Twitter is still the big daddy when it comes to hashtags. Facebook, they're there, but nobody's really using them that much. But I've seen LinkedIn doing some interesting things with hashtags. They're mainly trying to theme conversations around them. So I would watch that space if I were you. But Hashtagify me, you can plug in a keyword or a hashtag, and it brings up this really cool visual graph of that hashtag and related hashtags, along with their relative usage levels, their relationship levels, and some example posts of people using them. It's just a really cool tool for finding, if I'm looking for healthcare, finding related hashtags to that I might not have thought of and could also use. So Tweetby, that is specific to Twitter, but it helps with follower hygiene, basically. You can unfollow people who never followed you back. Like, it shows you a really nice rundown of that data so that you can see, people who have abandoned Twitter. Like, there's really no point following them because people on Twitter will judge you based on your ratio of followers to following. So it's important to unfollow people who aren't doing you any good. But Tweetby is great for that sort of thing. Google Alerts, analytics, keyword tools, insights, everything. Google gives you tons of free tools, and it would be crazy not to take advantage of them. Again, that's a topic that could take up a whole webinar, how to use the different analytics and keyword tools in Google, but definitely use them. Now, we already covered how important image generation is, and I mentioned Canva, but there are some other good free image tools that I use a lot. There's Image Flip, which it's good for meme generation, and you want to be careful with meme generation because you have to understand the kind of meme ecosphere when you play with memes. But Image Flip gives you the proper meme font and so forth, and has a lot of the popular images. So it's really cool for generating those. Giphy can create GIFs, or you can find GIFs there. GIFs are very popular, may or may not be your social media style. And then PictoChat, that should be PictoChat, I apologize. Or no, Chart, PictoChart. PictoChart is basically for making infographics. If you don't have a design resource, it's a really great way to do that. So I did want to include that. And yeah, anything else that you could want to do, there's an app for that. I have like 6 apps on my phone for different little image manipulation tricks. So, have fun with it. And that's the thing. The most important strategy for success is just to dive in, because you learn by doing this stuff, what works and what doesn't. It's just the best way to learn. You want to experiment, and there's no point experimenting if you don't have a look at the results and see what learnings you have from those. Sometimes I experiment with social tools on my personal social account and then see how they go over there before I roll them out to a business account. So again, that's something that you want to look into doing. And then you got to keep up to date on social media news. I hear about new apps or tools because I'm listening and reading about this stuff. And like I said before, social media moves really fast. I've come to rely on a few sources for most of my social media news. So I wanted to take a quick moment here to share those too. These people are down in the weeds, sifting through it all for us. And I'm grateful they're around. So I think they could benefit you guys too. First, Business to Community. Social Media Examiner, and Who's Blogging What. These are my main 3 reading resources. I recommend you sign up for all three of these. They're just really great. Like Who's Blogging What has this great, every week you get this summary paragraph where they talk about, the latest big news and different industry luminaries' opinions on it, and it has all these links. It's really useful. If you're into podcasts, the SEO podcast by eWeb Results is one of my favorites. Very entertaining. Social media marketing podcast, and again, yes, that is the same Social Media Examiner people. That is a great podcast that just has tons of new apps they talk about, new information, best practices. When something changes, that's where I find out about it. And then lastly, Agents of Change podcast is my other top three. So wanted to round it out with a nice group of three. So that's what I have for you. I hope it's been useful and that you got some good takeaways to bring back and implement. I'm happy to take questions now if you have them, but also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter for more, and if anything comes up later on, because I love talking about this stuff and I love sharing it. So thanks for your time.
Lorian, thank you so much. This has been super informative and helpful. I'm going to remind our audience that in order to submit a question, just submit it via the question box, and I'll send them your way now. So
great.
The first question is, what is your advice for increasing link clicks? The big problem this person's organization is facing is fatigue and people clicking on links to their website.
Okay, that's a good one. I would say, first off, if you aren't using a link shortener, I would do that. People just, I think part of the fatigue is that people just don't like seeing that big, long URL, and they start looking at that and they're like, oh, But the big thing to do is consider any social media post you make to be like, it's a lot like email subject lines. It has to be catchy. You might, experiment with being a little baity, clickbait, not clickbaity, but really that is what it is. You're competing for attention in like a sea of, other posts. And I don't know if you're talking mainly about, like Facebook or Twitter, but it's all the same. You may also want to do companion images that go along with your post that maybe call out the title of what it is you're trying to get people to click on. But if it's something where you've shared it a ton of times, it could be just that's the fatigue. And another thing you could try is this repurposing content angle. Try presenting that same information as different things. That's one option that might be helpful to you. And that's one of the benefits of, repurposing the content. You're presenting it in different formats. If they want to follow up and say what type of content it is that they're trying to drive people to, I might have additional insights, but that would be my main thing, is to try to mix it up on your side as well.
Great, thank you. This next question has to do with Snapchat in particular. So you said that the students or the prospective students are definitely using it. How do you plan for Snapchat content, and are there any kind of best practices or case studies that you could share for people who are just starting to use it?
I would say so. First off, I am even less of a Snapchat expert than I am other non-experts of other social media platforms, because it's not something that I've used professionally. I've tinkered with it on a personal side, and that is probably one of the most important things I can suggest that you do. Look for tutorials. There are tons of really great tutorials on YouTube on how to use Snapchat. But if I were in your shoes and I were diving in and trying to use it for institutions and prospective students, I would probably, if you have like a student, body group or something, tap them. Like have, give one of them access to Snapchat. If they're the millennials, and the teenagers, they know this platform. I would take guidance from them, and I would do that unashamedly, because they are experts in that. If you have someone on your staff that's an expert too, that's great. But obviously it's not going to be that kind of level like the Game of Thrones people making the Snapchat skin and like having millions and millions of people use it kind of thing, because that is beyond a marketing budget of what I would consider probably appropriate in my world. But as far as using it, there's Snapchat stories. And again, Instagram stories is actually doing a lot to compete with Snapchat stories. But I don't want to give too much information on Snapchat and too much advice, because I don't know that platform as well as other platforms. Like I said, it's kind of a tough nut to crack, and it has been for marketers. But where you're dealing with a student population, I think that that's an excellent opportunity to try to get some insights, and maybe even have them go out and make some Snapchat stories for you at a sports event or one of your institution events. They'll probably have some good insights for you.
That's great advice, and I can just pop in and just say it's great to have a geotag for any events that you might have for us for Snapchat. It kind of adds a different flair to it, so something to look into. The next question, so you mentioned that the popularity of live streams, and so just curious about your experience with those. Do you pre-plan all your live streams by alerting your audience via posts leading up to it? Is it just spur of the moment? Just kind of any experience and tips you have for those type of posts.
So yeah, I would say it is great to pre-plan them and let people know where that's appropriate. Like if it's an event or, like a keynote speaker or some kind of, special thing that you're at where in advance, but do not be afraid to be, very spur of the moment about it. That is fine too, because like I said, the live streaming, they don't expect it to necessarily be even as polished as a podcast. Like a podcast is very well planned out. I mean, it's great for you if you can plan some of that out and say, okay, well, we're going to go to, the reception part, then we're going to show, if it's a sports game, we're going to show some of the game, we're going to show the after party kind of thing. It's great to have sort of your script written out of basically your screenplay really, but it's not necessary, and certainly don't let it stop you, because I've seen tons of success using live streaming just out of the blue. It's surprising really. You should definitely try it. Okay, this is gonna sound stupid, but there was a squirrel on my dumpster, and I pulled up in the driveway. This is obviously not business related, but I just started Facebook streaming that, and I had 70 people watching that. Out of
that's hilarious.
So it really has to be tried to be believed, but you will get a decent audience if you're doing something completely spur of the moment. But if you want it to be a little more, polished, like you might for an event, planning is good for that. But also don't be afraid to take advantage of, something unexpected that happens. It's fine, roll with it.
Great, thank you. That's pretty funny. And then I think we have time for one more question before we close out, being respectful of your time and our participants' time. Are there any social platforms that you think are the next big thing for reaching younger audiences, or ones to watch, per se?
Well, so obviously there's a degree of fatigue that's come about, with new social platforms. There are hundreds. I think Snapchat is probably your biggest, most known one right now. But Instagram, don't underestimate Facebook. They know what they're doing. They have the granddaddy of audiences, and they are going after Snapchat, actively. They're, and in many cases, going better than Snapchat as far as some of the features, they're being more well received. So I would mainly pay attention to trends like the live streaming. And the thing is, generally, social media platforms do not come about with the idea of, being a good place for marketers to play. They're there for people to be social. So I am sure that everybody's out there searching for something where we can't get into it, and that they may be doing that. But I would say it's the trends more that you should watch for. And the existing ones, I think, are more than enough to keep us busy at this point. Probably something new will come along, but I can't right now imagine anything newer than the live streaming, except probably to become more interactive, and something tied in with VR is probably going to come about, to the degree that it already has a little bit with these panoramic shots that turn into the 360 views. You should play with those. By the way, you should post like a 360 view of your school campus. Like stuff like that is gonna just increase engagement on your posts. And it sounds silly, but if somebody's thinking about attending your school and they, live across the country or, are not nearby, they're gonna actually be really engaged by that. They'll like it. So that's something I'd recommend playing with. But the live streaming across all the platforms that can do it, that I would recommend just diving into that.
Wonderful. Lauren, thank you so much for all of the tips and your complete presentation. I think just coming from a personal note, I hope that we stick with the ones that we have now. It definitely takes a lot of effort to stay on top of how things are now, but thank you. And I just want to remind everyone that you can follow up with Lauren if you'd like to ask any additional questions. And I want to let everyone know here that this webinar has been recorded and will be available on the ASPPH website on the event page shown here in the next day or so. And we do have a few other ASPPH Presents webinars coming up. They are all on the upcoming events page on the ASPPH website. And lastly, just to give a plug, the Undergraduate Public Health and Global Health Education Summit will take place in March, and the call for abstracts will be live next month. So thanks again. Thanks to all our participants, and thank you to our presenter. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.